tell me how Tajae Spears is ranked RB19 in Dynasty and Tony Pollard is ranked RB34. In what world do those two things make sense? I can't understand why that's the case. Let's talk about 5 names in Dynasty football that I am personally looking to sell high this offseason. Now, to be clear, there's going to be a lot of high-profile names in this list. I like all these players. I think they're all going to be good for fantasy purposes. However, today's video is all about playing the market. Sometimes the market or the perceived value of a player doesn't match what they're actually going to give you in fantasy points. So I've got 5 guys that I think I want to tear down from or trade off my team because I think they're ranked too high in a lot of community-based rankings. That's what we're going to do. First player. This is going to break my heart. I like this guy, but Jaylen Waddle, I think I'm getting priced out of paradise right now, if you will. Wide receiver 10 on KTC. That's a little bit too high for me. On Flock Fantasy, our community has him as 21. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm at wide receiver 15 right now. Jaylen Waddle, in my humble opinion, and you can let me know if you don't agree, I think he is what he is at this point until Tyreek Hill leaves this team. A really good high-end wide receiver 2 for fantasy purposes. So my question really is, why is he priced as a top 10 wide receiver, especially in a offseason where we added names like Marvin Harrison Jr. to the top 10? You know, names like Malik Neighbors to the top 10. Why is he a top 10 guy right now? If you look at his career on a per game basis, his best finish is wide receiver 12. That was in 2022. Again, on a points per game basis. And his career high was 15.4 in 2021. That was with no Tyreek Hill when he broke the record for rookie receptions for wide receivers. My question to you guys is, ask this to yourself. Why is Jaylen Waddle so far ahead of the following names in Dynasty rankings? Jaylen Waddle at wide receiver 10. Why is he that far ahead of Brandon Ayuk, who has a higher career points per game? Nico Collins, who has a higher career points per game, just got a contract extension, just like Jaylen Waddle did, right? That bumped him straight up rankings because of that contract extension, but somehow Nico Collins hasn't moved and has a much higher ceiling from what we saw last year. Oh, I don't get it, but fair enough. Michael Pittman, 15.6 points per game. These are their career highs. DK Metcalf, who's a wide receiver 19, has a higher points per game finish than Jaylen Waddle. DJ Moore, wide receiver 21, higher points per game finish. Tank Dell, wide receiver 22. T. Higgins at wide receiver 23. What makes Jaylen Waddle 13 spots, multiple tiers in overall ranks, more valuable than a guy like Jaylen Waddle? Waddle is a high-end wide receiver 2. All the names I just brought to you are at minimum wide receiver 2s for their own team or for fantasy football. And I think the reason why his value has bumped up is because of the contract. I don't get it. Did anyone think Jaylen Waddle was going to leave Miami? Did anyone think the Dolphins were going to let him walk? It doesn't change his role. Doesn't mean he's going to get a higher target share with Tyreek Hill there. So just don't understand why he's all of a sudden more valuable now than he ever has been. And if you look at, age as a reason to, have Jaylen Waddle higher than these other names, that doesn't make any sense either, because every single name that I just brought you outside of DJ Moore is within 13 months of Jaylen Waddle's age, which is 25 and a half years old. So youth shouldn't be a reason that Waddle is way more valuable than those other names. So consider that list a tier down list. I would sell Jaylen Waddle and a third for Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, Rome Odunze, and a second in return. I would also sell Jaylen Waddle for Tank Dell, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, and get a second round pick in return. So again, it's not that if I have Waddle on my team, I'm desperately looking to move him. But if I can get some of these deals where I'm tearing down, maybe grabbing an extra first or an extra second, then that's what I'm looking to do with a guy like Waddle, who I think will have a fantastic year, a bounce back year in 2024. All right, this next one's going to piss off a lot of people, but I'm ready for it. Bring on the hate. I've talked about this already in the offseason, but everyone's favorite fantasy quarterback, fun personality, taken over the NFL by storm, CJ Stroud. I think it's time to take advantage of the market on CJ Stroud. This is not an anti-Stroud take. The market is just a little bit too much for me. Let's look at where he stands historically amongst rookie quarterbacks for fantasy football. Let's look at the top 10 rookie quarterback finishes in the last 25 years on a points per game basis. He's not a tier 1 finisher. Deshaun Watson in 2017, Cam Newton in 2011, and Justin Herbert in 2020. I think Herbert actually had the best rookie season of any quarterback ever. I don't think that was CJ Stroud, but all three of those names scoring over 22 points per game. Then in tier 2, you have a list of CJ Stroud from 4th all the way down to Marcus Mariota, who were all pretty much within 1 point per game of each other in their rookie season. So still a very good rookie season, but not that tier 1 where, he should be considered like quarterback 1 straight out, out of his rookie season. Which of these quarterbacks in this list do you guys think are good reference points to set expectations for CJ Stroud and his future fantasy seasons? Let's say that in a different way. Which of these names are close comparisons for how CJ Stroud is going to get fantasy points? I'll give you the names that I think are good comparisons. Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Andrew Luck, and Baker Mayfield. None of those guys are ever going to be, leading the league in rushing. Most of their fantasy points come from throwing the football. So if we compare Herbert, Burrow, and Luck, what was their points per game, next points per game seasons after their rookie year? Well, Herbert goes from 23 to 17, then 18.6. Joe Burrow goes from 20 to 21 to 15 after an injury-riddled season. Andrew Luck from 18 to 23 to 20. So all things considered, like pretty good outcomes. None of them are really breaking fantasy football though, and some of them dealt with some injuries. But the key thing we're trying to focus on here, again, because we're trying to play the market, is did either of those three names, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Andrew Luck, when they reach that tippy top point that CJ Stroud is at right now, a top 3 asset in dynasty football, were they able to improve their value in the market? Because it's very difficult to do that when you're already one of the top 3 most valuable assets in dynasty football, which is what CJ Stroud is right now. We got people in dynasty startups taking him at the 101. On Keep Trade Cut, he's a tier 1 asset, pretty much same value as Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, even though Josh Allen has like 4 or 5 years as finishing as a top 2 quarterback in fantasy football. So again, let's talk about Burrow, Herbert, and Luck. Burrow and Herbert, when they reached their, mountaintop, if you will, of course they didn't get more valuable, right? Like you can't get more valuable than the mountaintop, right? So they didn't improve their value. How about Andrew Luck? No, Andrew Luck did not improve his value either once he got to being one of those top 3 assets in dynasty football. So my point really is that CJ Stroud is being treated as if he's going to give you Josh Allen type of seasons, Patrick Mahomes type of seasons on a per game basis. And that very well could be true. But even if he does, there's nowhere else to go. There's no way but down once you're at the mountaintop. So ideally, I would rather tier down to a quarterback that I can believe that will offer you a similar points per game outcome, plus get a lot extra in return for CJ Stroud. Here's a list of some names. I'd say minus Trevor Lawrence, but let's talk about it. Kyler Murray. I want to tear down to Kyler Murray, who's averaging over 20 points per game in his first 5 years of his fantasy career. Last year, Kyler Murray averaged 0.5 points per game less than CJ Stroud, despite having no one to throw the ball to outside of Trey McBride. Okay, you can see some trades that I've done. I got Kyler Murray in London. I sent away Stroud in the Superflex League. Some people on Twitter loved that. A lot of people hated it. The next one, I sold CJ Stroud and Zay Flowers. I got Kyler Murray, the 101, and a 2026 first round pick. I think Kyler Murray is a fantastic, tier down. You might not be able to get those prices anymore because that was before the NFL draft, but still, the Drake London one I think is realistic. Justin Herbert, who has already had 2 seasons averaging over 22 points per game, who just averaged more points per game than CJ Stroud last year, despite not having Mike Williams for pretty much the entire season. How about Jordan Love, who, by the way, Jordan Love, this is what I can't comprehend. How is Jordan Love this, not, how do I say this with good English? How is Jordan Love and CJ Stroud's value in the community so different? I don't get it. CJ Stroud averaged less points per game than Jordan Love did in Jordan Love's first year as a starter. In Jordan Love's first year as a starter, he averaged 19.4 points per game, almost a full point per game more than CJ Stroud, and that was 5th amongst quarterbacks. So I just think it's time to take advantage of the market. CJ is going to be fantastic. He added Stephon Diggs, but you're going to get a similar points per game outcome with some of these other names, and you can get really impactful players on top of that. I'm going to get into the third player, but just got to let you guys know that maybe you have one of these names on today's list. Maybe you haven't done your rookie draft yet, or maybe you don't know what direction to go with your fantasy team, your dynasty team. Well, here on the Flock Fantasy Network with the DynastyLand channel, we offer live dynasty team reviews. If you want us to give you all that advice, tell you what directions to move, maybe some trades that you could look to target, then become a Mother Flocker member with the promo code LAND. You can check out the pinned comment for more info, but support the channel, get some rankings, a team review, all the premium tools on the site. It is really awesome. And 7-day free trial if you want to check it out. All right, the third player, which I'm sure this is going to be controversial, but I hope people can view this video and understand how I'm playing the market, not playing the player. Because that's what it's all about. That's how you win in Dynasty, is playing the market. Jonathan Taylor. Let's play Guess That Running Back. All right, I'm going to show you 6 running backs, and we're going to have a little game here. I want you to guess which one is Jonathan Taylor. All of these running backs are their team's clear RB1. They all averaged over 13 points per game, most of them in the last 2 seasons as well. So the first running back we're going to look at averaged 14 points per game last year, and the previous season over 19 points per game. The second running back we're going to look at, in both of his first 2 seasons, averaged over 13 points per game. The third running back that we're looking at last year averaged 15.6 points per game, and the season before that, 13.3. The fourth running back averaged 15.7 points per game in 2023 and over 16 in 2022. The fifth running back averaged over 15 points per game last year, and the sixth running back averaged almost 14 points per game in 2023. Who do you think these guys are? I want you to know, kind of pause right now. Let me know in the comment section. Well, RB1 is Josh Jacobs. RB2 is Ken Walker. RB3 is Jonathan Taylor. RB4 is Joe Mixon. The fifth one is Pacheco. And the sixth one is Jimmy James Cook. Yet, these guys are kind of giving you similar output on a points per game basis. But there is a huge gap in where JT is valued and all of the rest of these names. Jonathan Taylor is a tier 9 asset on Keep Trade Cut. Meanwhile, Kenneth Walker is a tier 12 asset. James Cook is a tier 14. Pacheco tier 15. Jacobs tier 18. Jacobs is a tier 18 asset and Jonathan Taylor is a tier 9. RB5 to RB15. Jacobs just continues going down. Joe Mixon is a tier 20 asset. Yet all of these guys in the last 2 years, for the most part, have given you a very similar outcome. And I know JT has, been dealing with an injury 2 years in a row, different injuries. But I have to ask you guys, is JT's value propped up by his RB1 season that we saw in 2021? All right, in 2021, he finished as the RB1, 22 points per game. Since that time, I'm not looking at his season-long finish because that would be even worse. But on a per-game basis, he has been nowhere near RB1 material, but we always kind of force him in that top 5 conversation because of his youth and because of what he did, now almost 3 years ago. So I think he's a little bit overvalued based off the market. We'll talk about ways that you can tear down from him. But the last thing that I'll say is this offense, I think, is going to be good with Anthony Richardson, but he is going to vulture touchdown opportunities from Jonathan. Last year, A-Rich scored a touchdown on 16% of his carries. Compare that to the biggest touchdown vultures we have known in fantasy for the last 4 years. Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Josh Allen was at 14%, Jalen Hurts at 10%. And we got A-Rich at 16% of his carries. Lastly, let's not forget that when Jalen Hurts was shining in that Shane Steichen offense, a result of him shining was running backs not being targeted. In fact, the last year Shane Steichen was with the Eagles, they targeted the running back position fewer than any other team in the NFL. So when you got a guy like Anthony Richardson, who, I'm in trouble, I don't need to dump the ball off to Jonathan Taylor because I'm just as good as a rusher in the open field. I'm going to take off out of the pocket. This is not Peyton Manning dumping the ball off. This is not Drew Brees who's in trouble, dump the ball off. Kirk Cousins, I'm in trouble, dump the ball off. No, this is one of the best athletes in the NFL ever. So You're not going to get targeted that much. You're going to get vultured in the red zone. I think we should be tearing down from Jonathan Taylor. Here's a couple options. JT in a third. Can I get Kenneth Walker, James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, and a first in return? According to KTC, some of those deals are doable. It will depend on your league, obviously. How about this? Can I send Jonathan Taylor and get Mixon, Derrick Henry, or Alvin Kamara and a first-round pick in return? There's so much insulated value there. I think that would be an incredible deal for you. All right, going from one Colt straight to another Colt. I'm not an Indianapolis Colts hater. I just think that this offense is going to change and certain people are not going to benefit. Michael Pittman. I have him ranked as my wide receiver 19, Flock Fantasy all the way up at 14, and KTC at 18. Pittman was really good last year. He had a career high in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and fantasy points per game. Then he gets a huge extension this offseason. So why am I telling you to sell him? It's all about the market. And I think there are options way further down rankings that will give you a similar points per game outcome that you can get more in return. The issue with the Colts right now is we have no idea if Anthony Richardson can support a fantasy wide receiver in a season-long format. Last year, I just told you everything that Pittman did, career highs. That was because of Gardner Minshew. Now it's going to be Anthony Richardson, and we have no idea if he can do what Gardner Minshew did for Michael Pittman. If you look at Anthony Richardson, because here's the question. What is the evidence that Anthony Richardson can support Michael Pittman as a top 12 to 15 wide receiver in fantasy? There's really no evidence whatsoever. Anthony Richardson at Florida was one of the worst passers in his class. You know, he had 12 collegiate starts. He needs to play a lot more football. And in his last year, which was his only year as a full starter, he completed under 54% of his passes, which is in the 270 range amongst quarterbacks in college football that year. By the way, his wide receiver one at Florida, because they had to run the ball a lot, only had 661 yards. That wide receiver one was Ricky Pearsall, who, by the way, just became a first-round pick because Anthony Richardson was no longer his quarterback last year. He had better quarterback play, which projected him into the first round. A-Rich, his first year in the NFL. Again, what evidence is there that he can support Michael Pittman? Well, his first year in the NFL, didn't play much, but he completed under 60% of his passes. He ranked 61st in the NFL in completion percentage. And again, what is the evidence that these two have chemistry, that they can be successful together? Well, there's only 2 games last year where Anthony Richardson was healthy and he played the entire game. And that was week 1 and week 4. In week 1, Michael Pittman went crazy, 23.7 fantasy points. In week 4, he was only targeted 5 times, only caught 1 of those passes because of the inaccuracies, and scored under 5 fantasy points. There is literally no evidence that we can say Anthony Richardson will support even one wide receiver. There might be a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of boom and bust weeks. The last thing I'll say is this team just added A.D. Mitchell. A lot of you guys in the Dynasty community thought he was worthy of being a first-round pick. We found, out that he fell down boards because of some off-field issues. But ultimately, between Pittman, Downs, Mitchell, Jonathan Taylor, all on a run-first offense, is Pittman really not going to be impacted whatsoever? There's quite a few names that I think you can tear down from and get a lot in return. But let's just start with straight swaps. I'd rather have Nico Collins long-term connected to CJ Stroud. Can you get DJ Moore plus something? Can you get Roma Dunze plus something? I mean, we talked about Jaylen Waddle earlier, but does someone in your league value Michael Pittman more? Maybe you can get Jaylen Waddle. Can you get Tank Dell plus, a first-round pick, send Pittman and a second-round pick? Can you do that same deal for a T. Higgins, a DK Metcalf? There's just so many names out there that I would like to tear down to instead of keeping Michael Pittman. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's enough red flags for me to at least explore the market. And the last name on this list is Tajae Spears. I got him at RB24. This is all about the market. I don't understand his dynasty value right now. I can't wrap my head around why he's top 20 on KTC, RB19. Tell me how Tajae Spears is ranked RB19 in Dynasty, and Tony Pollard is ranked RB34. In what world do those two things make sense? I can't understand why that's the case. I like Tajae just as much as the next guy, and I really thought he would have had a shot to be a league winner before they signed Tony Pollard. But the reality is they did bring in Tony Pollard and paid him money in a market where very few teams are paying running backs big time money. Remember, last year, Tony was coming off a serious season-ending injury the year before with the Cowboys, and he said himself that he didn't feel like he was fully healthy until week 11 versus the Carolina Panthers. If you look from a week 11 onwards, he was PFF's #1 graded rusher. Okay, he averaged more yards per attempt in that span. He had the most missed tackles forced from week 11 onwards, and he had an elusive rating that bumped up 27 points. Considering Tajae only saw 23% of the rushing market share for the Titans last year, why are we assuming that he's going to lead the way? I just don't understand it. I get it, like, he's probably a better pass catcher, he's got more juice, but let's not forget that Tony Pollard has 20 pounds on Tajae Spears. So if anyone's going to lead this backfield in rushing, why couldn't it be Tony Pollard? I'm not saying it will be, but that indicates to me that the Dynasty community is saying Pollard's not the guy, definitely, because we have 15 spots in our rankings difference between those two running backs. I just don't get it. Ultimately, if I had him, I'd be shopping and trying to tier down to any of the names or tier up to any of the names that I have highlighted. If I can somehow get to a Trey Benson, I'll send you a third in Tajae Spears. Does that get it done? I'm going to try. I'm going to see. If I'm a competing team, can I do a straight swap for a Derrick Henry? And how about a Zamir White? I know Zamir White is going to be the lead back in Las Vegas this year. I'd rather take a shot on that with the running back market being so volatile each and every year. Can I tier down to a Joe Mixon and get something? Can I tier down to a David Montgomery, a Blake Corum, and get anything in return? I'm talking like third round picks. Is that possible? Can I go to an Alvin Kamara who's RB27, almost 10 spots lower than Tajae Spears? And can I get, a second round pick on top of that? Can I get a second and Ramondre, a second and Kendre? How about a second and Brian? How about Tony Pollard and a second? What is possible with these type of deals? Do you have to add a third to get a second? In some of these trades, can you add a second and get a first plus that player in return? Those are the type of deals that I'm going to be exploring in the market. I don't understand why Tajae is ranked that high, but look, those are 5 names that I'm playing the market with. You might hate it, you might love it. Let me know in the comment section. Hit that like button, and we'll see you guys very soon. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.